Why do we need to teach 2D drawings today?
That's a great question, Ethan. I got a really good answer. Stay tuned.
Hi, Jonathan. Nice to see you again. So this week's topic is that why is it important for of learning or doing 2D drawings? So can you give me about your opinion?
Absolutely. These days, you think, oh, it's all computer based. What do we need to learn 2D drawing for? Why on earth should a student, a construction management student or an architectural technologist, why do they need 2D drawing? And to me, it's because drawing is our bread and butter. Drawing is our means of communication. And teaching a student to draw manual drafting, instrument drawing, I call it, using a T-square and a set square and a drawing board. I've got a case at school with 20 drawing boards in it. We got all the set squares and T-squares we need. I give the students pencils to draw with. They have never had to draw a technical drawing before. Most students have got no idea. Most of them don't know how to hold a pencil. They think holding a
Mhm.
pencil is like holding a pen. And some of the things I see, Ethan, is that they think that the pen's going to escape from them. So they hold it with a death grip. And what they need to learn to do is to hold the pencil lightly. They need to be able to rotate the pencil when they draw.
Mhm.
But remember that what we're trying to get the architectural technologists to do is the architectural bread and butter is producing technical drawings that communicate the design of the building. If it's a
And
detail,
communicate
it's got to
well.
communicate the detail, and it has to communicate well. If it doesn't communicate well, then it's not doing its job. So
Yes.
where do we start with communication? Let's start with doing a manual drawing. It's a 2D manual drawing, teaching some of the fundamentals like modeling, line weight, line scale, line type, hidden line, what's hidden, what's exposed, teaching all of that fundamental stuff so that when a student produces an elevation in ArchiCAD or Revit or Vectorworks, that elevation has modeling on it. It has line weight that is appropriate. If things are hidden, it's appropriate to what it's hidden. Remember that our students might have to draw. I don't know if you've ever had to do it. I've had to draw with a carpenter's pencil on the back of a piece of gibboard.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
how can you do that? You've got a skill of communicating in 2D, and that's what I'd like to teach. And it's a big task really because it's a physical skill that they need to develop. It's not a it's a bit mental. It's a bit of a mental skill, but it's also a physical skill. How do you make the lines? How do you control the line weight? Light lines, heavy lines, thick lines, so two lines one on top of the other. That's a physical skill that we're trying to develop in the students, and we've
And
got
a
very
little bit
little
of
time to do
artistic
it.
sense, a little bit of artistic sense into it too, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if we can, that'd be fantastic. But most of the time, we're really stuck with just getting the raw physical skill.
Hmm.
And later on, we're going to look at their architectural drawings, the result of their CAD models. The BIM models are going to produce elevations. We're going to look at those and go, all the line weights are the same. You haven't done this. The building doesn't
Many
model.
of
I
times
don't
I
know what's
saw that.
front and what's behind. So
Yeah.
you haven't communicated the intent of the building. Then we've got all the details. Details need to communicate the material, the density of the material, the spacing of the materials apart from each other so they're readable. The CAD program will mash everything together. We won't be able to read the concrete separate from the timber frame or the timber
Yeah.
frame separate from the DPC. And all of that needs to be communicated. And I use the 2D drawing to start that process, to start the student learning about line weight, line color, line style, line thickness, all that kind of stuff. The way I was
Yeah.
taught was that the line thickness round materials and details is representative of the density of the material. So concrete has the heaviest lines, timber has
Hmm.
heavy lines, but gibboard has a lighter line because it's a less dense material. You
Hence.
know,
Yeah.
weatherboards have a less line, but so that was the idea, was really to give the students the skills or to be able to develop the skills in a student that'll carry them through life, that will
Yeah.
be able to develop into their CAD drawings, but also give
Hmm.
them the ability to communicate on pencil and paper when they need it. And even if they
Yes.
use something like the iPad and Procreate to draw their details, which is really quite cool, that you can actually make some really cool details in Procreate. Um, but you still need to understand line weight, line scale, hatching. Hatching is
Hatching.
so important. Getting the student to get the right hatching is really important. And it's the way that we communicate. Drawings are a shorthand for of thicknesses and hatching. And instead of using lots of words, often we use the shorthand of the hatching and the line weight to show the contractor. And often they won't read the words to start with. They'll look at the picture and they'll
Yes.
understand the picture and then they'll read the words later. And so we
Yeah,
need to make
that's
sure that the
about it.
students have got
Yes.
that technique.
Mhm. Yeah. But when you do 2D, now we just talk about 2D drawing. So can you tell me about any perspectives and what do you think about that? I think perspectives is also as important as 2D drawings because some people they understand well when they saw perspective drawing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that I think perspective drawings will be something we could talk about later. I
Uh-huh.
do teach the students 1 point perspective, but of
Uh-huh.
course the challenge with teaching 1 point perspective, if you don't teach line weight and line scale, then the perspective
Yeah.
doesn't have the modeling that you need, which comes back
And
to
you
the
don't,
2D technical
same
drawing.
thing, you don't see the sense again. It's flat.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So,
so the way I teach the 2D drawing is I've got a little timber block. It's about the size of a fist, and I've had a box full of them made, and they've got cutouts front and back, and they've got a hole
uh-huh.
through the middle of them, and
Uh-huh.
I've labeled them so that the student knows which is the top and which is the front and which is the side. And the first exercise in 2D drawing is to draw that timber block, and because it's real scale and real life, what we can do is we can actually get the student to feel the block. So they understand that it's timber, they can understand what it feels like, they can look at it from different angles. We could, if we wanted to, use that block again for doing three-dimensional observational sketching
Uh-huh.
because they're already familiar with it. And one of the Edward de Bono things that I really liked about his reading when I read him was that you should teach backwards. I think you called it reverse engineering a minute ago.
Yes, I did.
And so what you're doing is you're teaching something relative to something they already know. So you give them a block of wood. Now they know what the block of wood looks like. Then we teach them how you draw that in third angle projection, which is a new concept. But because it's
Yeah.
based on the block of wood that they're holding, they can stick the block of wood on the page and see exactly how the block relates to the drawing.
Uh-huh.
The next drawing exercise after that is to draw a small house. Now this introduces the problem of scale. How do you explain scale to a student? And it's
Uh-huh.
an abstract concept. But because we're now doing a third angle projection, which was similar to the block, we're now using the knowledge of drawing the block to relate to the drawing of the house. And I draw a section, an elevation, and a plan view of the house. And it's just a simple house. It's just a one room, just
Yeah. Yeah.
a one room thing. So it's
Yeah.
real easy to draw. But it's using that Edward de Bono concept again. That is that we're using third angle projection and we're using some knowledge that they already know.
Uh-huh.
After that, we go into other drawing techniques, and there's an exercise where they have to copy a whole set of drawings. Well, there's only 4 drawings, but they have to copy them, exactly. So in other
Uh-huh.
words, the line weights are there, and the line scales are there, and the words are there, and by writing out, 100 millimeter, 20 MPa
Yes.
concrete on blah 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 blah. They may not understand what they're writing, but we're starting to get them familiar with a language that they will then use. And later
Yeah.
on, we'll use that language again. And it's just that idea of getting them used to the new technique, the way that, because drawings are not an end in themselves.
Yeah, it's
Drawings
a
are
very
a,
fundamental. Yes, what you told me is very fundamental, and in the industry, what I know is that they've been in industry, but they don't really know what informations they need to put in the technical drawings. Let's say, what is the brand material, the thickness, the size. Well, it's all missing, and all the time the contractors send back RFIs after RFIs after RFIs, and that's one of the project has delayed and ultimately the client suffered. But anyway, it's what you mentioned is like the way you teach about how you teach 2D is very enlightening. The blocks that you use and teach on the first day of the drafting class and okay, do it. It's really amazing, and I will copy your technique. That's for sure. And
Hey, let's go make drawings so you can just get some blocks made up. Don't get them made
yeah,
by a student because then every block's is slightly different. So you need to have some consistency in the way they're made. But
hmm
it's really important. I think that when I left university, I didn't understand how to draw, and I was really fortunate that I was taught. I worked for a government department,
yeah,
and
yeah,
district drafting officer who would look at my drawings, tell me what was wrong, send me back to the drawing board literally because we didn't have computers in those days, and I'd
yeah.
have to fix it. And I really learned how to communicate. There's a book that we use in our class called Experiencing Architecture, and one of the quotes out of that book that I like is that the drawings are not an end in themselves. The drawings are a means of communicating your design. And the other thing that I was really fortunate was that when I left university after architecture school, I worked for this government department. They gave me the week one, they gave me a contract and they said, in 2 weeks' time, you're running the site meeting and you're going to run
hmm
this contract.
uh-huh,
And you get on site and the contractor goes, what the hell's this detail? I don't understand this at all. And you have to
hmm
explain it. And then when you finish being told off by the contract, you go back to your office. You do not make that same mistake on your details.
hmm
Your details are much better because you know how you're trying to communicate. And so you
yeah,
develop a knowledge or you develop a skill of drawing better because of the feedback from the contractor that you're getting. So I was unbelievably fortunate with my training. It was just
yeah,
so
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. Yeah, I also remember my days in the drafting office. I was quite fortunate to work for American architect and architect come contractors, and he has a construction company as well. So it's quite a unique experience, somebody, right? So anyway, what he mentions that I was really an architectural graduate, and I'm very proud. All the graduates are very proud from, and they say I have a degree, and when I when I produce a drawing, everything's look flat, everything's is the same line weight.
Mm,
I know how to do drafting. I learned how to draw all the perspective when I was 5th grade, and because at the school was a technical school, so I learned that. However, when I after the graduations and went to the actual drafting teams and started working, my drawing is totally flat and say, okay, your dimensions are not aligned, the informations must be there. So now when I look it back, it's like, well, I was really fortunate and I know how to put dimensions. I know I not just knowing, and also I can explain to the students or another person say that, okay, a good drawing must have that kind of
yep.
information. The presentations must be that. So so that
Well,
it's very pleasing for me. I think it's a
but the,
therapeutic, I think.
remember who our client is when we're teaching the student. It's not just the student, it's also their next employer. So
hmm
our employers are expecting our students to be able to do certain things, and
hmm
communicating through drawing is one of those things they're expecting. So we need to make sure that we upskill our students and give them their experience that we've had. I don't forget that the manual drafting also gives us the opportunity to introduce things like scales, sheet
hmm
sizes, title blocks, what's hidden lines, how to dimension well. I notice your slideshows have got some really strict rules about where dimensions should go. The 4 lines of dimension
Yeah,
overall, the changes in the walls. I mean, this is exactly the way that I teach as well.
yeah,
But we need to make sure that we teach those things, and we've got to. So the 2D drawing is just a way into the learning to use drawings to communicate. And it's in
yes,
some ways it's a quick win because the student thinks that they can do something straight away. Everyone says they can't draw, and after day one, they've actually got a drawing finished, which is really quite cool. But
and also to
early
ensure,
wins are another subject to completely.
yeah,
We should just leave that one alone. But that's
yeah,
my answer. Why do I do it? I think it's really important. I think it's really a valuable skill. I think it's still a way to communicate, even using electronic means. And I think one of the phrases you used with me is it's like learning the basics of maths. You've got to
yes,
learn your times tables in order for doing all the complex stuff later. And drawing is like that. 2D drawing, you're learning the basics that you're going to then apply to all the other stuff.
yeah, yeah. All right, thank you, thank you. Thanks for explanations, and it's really awesome and good to learn all the tips from you. And I hope all the listeners will be benefit from it, and definitely I'm benefiting from these sessions. And see you next time.
Well,
Bye.
thanks for your question, Ethan. It was a great question. Thanks very much.